Welcome into CMS-Connected. Hello, everybody. I'm Butch Stearns. This is the web content management industry's only news commentary show. Glad you can be a part of it. Glad to have you here. And again, my name is Butch Stearns. I am the co-host to this show, and alongside, I'm joined, as always, by the principal analyst of Digital Clarity Group and also the president of DCG, Scott Lewer. Scott, how are you?
I'm good, Butch. How are you?
You're always good.
I am. I feel good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
At least we never hear what's wrong in your world because you never bring that to this show.
Maybe we can have a show all about that.
All about what's wrong in your world?
Yeah. Be a long show, though.
Let's talk about what's going on in this show and what we have coming up in this show. Let me give you the subject of this show first of all. It's embracing one's content marketing strategy. Now, this is CMS Connected. This is a show about content management systems and the world around that, but we're talking content marketing strategy. I feel like this is the first CMS Connected that we're speaking my language now, Scott, that we're getting into it. When we talk about content marketing strategies, when it comes specifically to the CMS world, what do people need to focus on? What's important?
Yeah, I think the connection between these two worlds, it really is all about the content, and it really is all about the audience, right? Content marketing is all about essentially shifting from inside out, where companies are just talking about themselves and doing disruptive marketing, to outside in, where they care more about their audience and providing information and services to be there for them, right? And so what a CMS is going to allow you to do is help you to really, A, understand who your audience is, and B, what information do you have in content in your repository that you can serve up to them to be relevant.
Well,
so it's all about relevance.
What a good CMS platform needs to do is do that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, and we'll talk about that. That's what this show is all dedicated to today, and that is the subject. Here's what we have coming up in this show. Dechay Watts is going to join us, the co-founder of Sprout Content. That's going to be in our interview segment. Bryan Ruby will be reviewing FirstSpiritCMS for our Spotlight segment. And as always, we'll have our Rapid Fire segment where we put Scott on the clock. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge our CMS Connected sponsors for this show and for every show that make this all happen. Falcon Software is the first one. The people at Falcon Software can provide you with expert advice and integration solutions for all your creative web design, web content management, e-commerce, social, or mobile needs. And you know what? They do it with a smile. That's what they do. And by Digital Clarity Group. DCG is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. DCG was founded to tie it right in with the topic of today's show on content marketing strategy. And you know what? They smile pretty well too. And your teeth are really good at DCG. So we'll get into that. I would also like you to recommend to you to look down below you on the player here where you're watching this show, and you can download the white paper on content marketing that's located at the bottom of your screen. All right, time to kick things off with our top news stories in the industry. You ready, Scott?
I am.
All right, let's do it. Our first story focuses around EMC and around Documentum. And the story comes from CMS Wire, and it talks about how Documentum leapfrogs the competition. Some of the key points in the story. According to Frost and Sullivan, it'd be ill-advised to call EMC Documentum a legacy enterprise content management system that's too sluggish and weighed down to keep pace with the times. In fact, Frost and Sullivan just named Documentum, this is pretty interesting, Scott, the winner of its 2013 Global Enterprise Content Management Product Quality Leadership Awards. And not only did they name them, the EMC vendor that is more than 2 decades old scored top marks in 5 out of the 5 categories evaluated. So EMC Documentum has a reputation for being overpriced, to be quite honest. So is it not worth every penny of what it costs?
It is to those who use it, right? So if we think about the context here of who's using EMC software, right? And who's using its competitors, IBM, OpenText.
Enterprise level.
Right, these enterprise level companies. They're willing to shell out the bucks. They got big, huge organizations that have critical processes that they need to be able to manage and critical information. We're talking about, companies that are in these large regulated environments, financial services, pharmaceutical companies, engineering companies, where their information is really critical to them, and things like regulatory and compliance and that sort of stuff is really, really key, right?
So the fact that Forrester ranked them in 5 categories as the tops in all 5.
Yep.
It sort of says, to the point of this article on CMS Newswire, sort of says, well, for those of you who think that a legacy platform like this is sluggish and too slow, well, according to Forrester, no.
Yeah.
They're keeping up with the times almost better than anybody else at an enterprise level.
So Frost and Sullivan, right? Not Forrester, but yeah. So the thing about
All right, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. And I'm sure Forrester will take the credit for it. But the story though here is again is who are they comparing to? I think when they're talking about leapfrogging the competition, it makes for a catchy article, right? But ultimately. They compete against a number of firms, but they're being compared in this article, in this particular study, to other kind of also legacy enterprise applications, right? So to the IBMs and to the OpenText and that sort of stuff. And they're basically saying that Documentum has done a good job. And by the way, I used to live and breathe the Documentum world when I was on the consulting side. This is what I was in the pharmaceutical space, and this is what I lived. But to be honest, I think that really the play here is something I know we wanted to talk about is the big data play and what they're going to be able to do there.
Well, from the big data side, tell us how
Yeah.
Documentum ranks high or scores high when it comes to big data, because in the enterprise level world here at the Pulse Network, we work with SAP, Intel, IBM, and a lot of enterprise level companies, and when it comes to big data, I do understand, have a now much better understanding of that world. There's the security of it, there's the sharing of it, there's the collaboration, there's the understanding of the unstructured data versus the structured data. So how does Documentum score high when it comes to big data?
And I think that they're probably just starting to use the term. I don't think it was really, this was always the case. They were always managing lots and lots and lots of unstructured data. And now what we're basically saying is what big data is, the problem big data is trying to solve is trying to take the massive amount of information and make it real and usable in real time. Well, what better scenario than for an employee who needs to figure out where some certain information lives in his organization? What have we done on XYZ? The discovery process, maybe when you're going through some sort of regulatory compliance battle sort of thing, and you need to be able to find out where all in your organization some information lives. That is a big data problem, and it continues to grow day over day over day in these large organizations, and they need to be able to keep track of that. And so essentially, while not necessarily calling it big data, they've changed their underlying architecture to be able to handle the massive amounts of data and to be able to allow an end user sitting there, an employee, to be able to access treasure troves of that and be able to find a minute piece of information that they need to be able to do the jobs most effectively.
In our attempt to keep you updated on all that's going on in the CMS world, we go to headline number 2 here on CMS-Connected, and for that we go to CMS Connection and a story that's entitled Movable Type to Take on Drupal and WordPress. On September 12th, Bryan Ruby from CMS, who we'll hear from later in the show, CMS Report, excuse me, wrote an interesting article on a press release that was sent to him titled Movable Type Creating Momentum in North America. The purpose of the press release, Scott, was to announce a series of new partnerships as well as 2 newly launched websites in an effort to kickstart a new Movable Type Momentum campaign in North America. However, Scott, it was the title of the press release that caught Bryan Ruby's attention, quote, Movable Type to Take on WordPress and Drupal. Now, Movable Type, the blogging platform, it wasn't that long ago that they would never even mention the other Drupal or WordPress in a sense. Are they taking a risk here by doing that? Or?
Nah, I don't think there's, Bryan writes a nice article. Bryan does a great job there. Basically, one of his points is that in the article they point out, another expression engine, I think, that wasn't on his target list, and he raises the point that, now it is because they mention it. But look, I can go and say as an analyst firm, Digital Clarity Group, and put out an announcement that says that we're taking on Gartner and Forrester. It doesn't mean that in actuality that we're any sort of a threat to them. Same circumstances here. Movable Type is no threat to either of those two. I think the interesting part of this story is really that this, talking about the vibrancy of this space.
So what about the fact that they're opening offices in New York and they're moving into North America? What's the significance to that for you?
Yeah, I think, look, so first of all, it was bought by a company called Infocom, and Infocom is a Japanese-based company that back in January of 2011 purchased Movable Type. Essentially because, and I don't know this firsthand, but apparently Movable Type is, used even more commonly in Japan than it is here, and so it's the market leader there. So they basically wanted to buy it up to be able to enhance their social services offering that they were doing. And so the key there is that now that they've started to saturate that market a little bit, that they want to come over into the US. And so they're trying to reinvigorate a little bit the community that frankly had died down quite a bit in the last few years and try to put some energy back into it. They've relaunched movabletype.org and movabletype.com to try to reinvigorate the community and get them working again. I think the key though here is that once again we see big money in a company like Infocom, which is a very large company, investing money into what would seemingly be a pretty saturated content management market. We've got thousands of products in this space. And I think the interesting part here is that while WordPress is by far and away the leader in terms of they have the most number of sites on their thing, they own 20% of the sites on the web are on WordPress. But the second most is Joomla, who owns 3%, and then Drupal at 2%, and everybody else is a very distant follower behind that. 67%, however, the sites put on the web today have no CMS associated with them whatsoever.
Wow.
And that's the land grab that these guys are trying to come in and do. That's where they think they can make some penetration.
For headline number 3, we move on to a story from CMS Wire, and it talks about IBM, but what it really talks about, Scott, is the space when it comes to social software and when it comes to social business. We go back, as we often do, to the Magic Quadrant, to Gartner's Magic Quadrant for this story. The headline of the story, IBM beefs up mobile social email capabilities in smart cloud for social business. But the significance of this story, according to CMS Wire, is that IBM seems to have taken to heart the message from the Gartner Magic Quadrant for workplace social software. The latest report dubs IBM a leader in the crowded vendor space of social business because it's developed relationships with organizations and partners. It's identified social business as an important part of its overall strategy. And IBM has the technology and services to help clients develop social business strategies and social technologies. Is this the latest saying that, you know, a legendary brand, a legendary player like IBM gets it, that they understand that they've got to move the ship as big as it may be?
Yeah, this is an interesting space, right? Because what you're seeing is, and let's talk about who are the 4 that are in the leaders quadrant there. It's Jive, it's SharePoint, it's IBM, and it is Salesforce.com. 2 of whom, Microsoft or SharePoint and IBM, are kind of considered legacy applications that have always had lots of information management in the enterprise. And the other 2, Jive and Salesforce.com, are kind of coming in it as the new kids on the block. They have more of the social capabilities already, and they're trying to, you know, basically take control or manage trying to be able to insert their capabilities on top of your basically your ECM capabilities, right? And so we're seeing this come from two polar opposite ends, and both, you know, 4 of them all being considered leaders, even though they're coming at this from different spaces. I think we're going to talk about Box a little bit later, but an interesting thing that I see here, announcements that IBM was, you know, that they made recently was the mobile file sync capabilities, that they've got this new social bridging capability, that they've got social capabilities in context of mail now. So IBM has a number of products, right, inside the organization. So Same Time and all those, and now they're trying to pull all those together essentially to be able to offer this social layer on top of your information, which is extremely helpful, and I love that they're doing it. On the other side, we see Box not even included in this quadrant whatsoever, and they came at it from that space, and they were all about social before. So I just think it's an interesting area.
It's interesting because for the legacy platforms, like you said, you know, they need to both do this, but also have the image out there that their platforms aren't stuck in the mud, that
Correct.
they aren't sluggish, that when it comes to social business, they can. Yet the competition, that, you know, comes at it from a different angle, saying, "Well, we started social.
Exactly.
Okay, that's what we do." And so, but they have to be taken seriously to know that at an enterprise level, you can handle that type of business too, right?
Absolutely, but I think, you know, for an IBM, they don't have to be first out. You know, one of the knocks on them that Gartner makes in this is that, you know, they're a little bit sluggish in getting to the thing. So what?
Great point.
They've got all of your data. They've got all of your information. You've been managing. You can, you know, they've been managing your information in a secure environment and with your confidence for an awful long time. They don't have to be the first ones to come out and put a social wrapper on top of that. They're just now adding extra value to what they already had for you. But if anyone were to try to shift away from that, first of all, there's an awful lot of questions about the kind of the newer social entrants, whether they have some of those security capabilities and all that sort of stuff. So folks are slow to shift away. They're just really happy to see some of these new capabilities. So let me throw
you a little curveball here and ask you a question about
sure.
the subject of our show is content marketing strategy.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is IBM telling their story, and you mentioned 2 or 3 times they don't have to be the first out.
Right.
So talk about that in the CMS space. Is it even more important in the CMS space when you're telling your own story to be right or to wait till you get it right than having to be the first one out of the box?
I think it depends who you are, right? If you're movable type, maybe you want to be bleeding edge and stuff because you're trying to gain market share. When you're IBM,
But you
Doesn't
can
matter.
afford to do that.
Exactly.
Right.
And oh, by the way, if something screws up on movable type, there's not a whole big, huge, there's not a really large implication. You mess up some capability with IBM where you're managing an enterprise's, that's a big whoops, right? There's a lot of problems there, and they have huge services issues and customizations and all that kind of stuff. So they've got to be a little bit slower, but that's okay. Again, Gartner's focus is on the kind of Fortune 1000 companies and helping them to meet their needs. So it doesn't surprise me that these guys get a top billing on a report like that.
You're watching CMS-Connected. I'm Butch Stearns alongside with Scott Lear. This is our headline segment, and for our next headline, we go actually to the San Francisco News, and we talk about BoxWorks. And at their latest conference, they made some major announcements. More and more personal data is being stored in the cloud, and now businesses are moving in that direction as well. Even in the face of questions over how to keep that data safe from prying eyes, and keeping that data safe was the focus of the BoxWorks conference in San Francisco. Again, back to Gartner's Magic Quadrant. We'll get to that in a minute, and we'll save that question, Scott, because BoxWorks isn't even mentioned in that quadrant. But what about this conference that they had? This is a company, BoxWorks, that has a 29-year-old whippersnapper, Aaron Levy, who's a $100 million guy who comes out and makes bold announcements. Yep. Credit to them for having the conference and making all these announcements, right? Yeah. But make sense of it for us.
Yeah, and it's always a fun show. I wasn't there this year personally, but I was there last year, and it was a great time. So here again, and this is what I'm saying, we're coming at it from the other end now. The big announcements were that essentially Box is now coming up. It was a theme last year. It was about how secure it is, right? As a product, how security, because it's a cloud, right? So they're one of the first ones out into the cloud. It's a completely cloud-based business, and they've got to prove to everybody by being one of the, Salesforce and Box both being some of the first entrants in the cloud, where that's the underpinnings of their business. They have to first prove that security is there, right? And with all these NSA issues and everything else, that's top of everyone's mind. And so I think that for them to have to come out and spend more and more time, each one of these BoxWorks announcing how secure they are, we can see that they are pushing into the enterprise, and that's the concern by the CIOs, is how are you going to help me make sure that my information and my data is protected?
Well, before you go on, this was my mistake. I forgot we had this. We have a video with the announcements from the BoxWorks conference, so let's go to that.
Q4 of this year, there'll be more tablets sold than personal computers.
He's 29 years old and worth an estimated $100 million because Aaron Levy saw that change coming a mile away. He's the CEO of the cloud storage company called Box.
We have a lot of new ways that we communicate and a lot of new ways that we are entertained because of mobile devices and tablets, but that hasn't translated into the enterprise yet as much as it will in the next couple of years.
As consumers flock to Google Drive and Dropbox, Levy's made sure his company gets the corner on big business. He says 92% of the Fortune 500 use Box in part because of this.
Really focusing all of our energy on the security, privacy, safety, and protection of your information.
Indeed, at the third annual BoxWorks conference in San Francisco, the show floor is packed with security companies. Industry watchers say security is one spot where the cloud has a black eye.
Box's chief rival, many people think it's Dropbox, has been accused over the past few years of a lot of hacks and security breaches.
Box has a big security team, and all of its apps use encryption. But with recent revelations about the federal government snooping around in people's data, one notable cryptographer says he's taking no chances.
It's been suggested that people not trust American internet companies that store this stuff. And I think they have a point.
Phil Zimmerman created PGP, the most widely used email encryption program. He says using a separate encryption app is the only way he'll use cloud storage. He'll never trust the cloud company's own security.
Because a service provider can be coerced by the government.
I'm talking to Scott.
Hand over the keys and hand over the files so they can be decrypted by those keys.
But although the CEOs of Yahoo and Facebook have said the government's come knocking for their users' data, Levy says Box hasn't been getting those requests. Apparently, the NSA finds big businesses' data a little boring.
Marketing information and product catalogs, not the kind of communication that the government is looking for.
In San Francisco, Jonathan Bloom, ABC 7 News.
So an interesting story from the local ABC affiliate out there in San Francisco talking about this, but Levy, the CEO, the founder, the 29-year-old, is out there saying that the enterprise space is wide open, and the one common theme you kept hearing was what you said, security. I mean, you can't, if you're going to talk to enterprise-level companies, you've got to start there.
Exactly. This is what they're struggling with. So they've gotten the adoption of the consumerization of IT is certainly relevant, right? That people were they were using this anyway, they were using the Dropbox anyway. By the way, I really love how when they showed the picture of that tablet, they showed the little ABC icon as if anybody actually has that.
Smart.
But anyway, so consumerization of IT is really here. That was the wave that they rode in the beginning. Was it's really easy to use. We can make this simple for you. Now they're facing the pushback from enterprises saying, "Wait a minute, but is this secure?" So they're having to go back and prove that.
Quick final comment on this story. Are you surprised that BoxWorks isn't even mentioned in Gartner's Magic Quadrant?
The box isn't mentioned. It does surprise me, I think. But again, think about Gartner's audience, and I'm constantly counseling people on this. Gartner's audience is the Fortune 1000, where this isn't yet relevant as much as Levy would like it to be. It is, but in kind of more departmental uses, not the enterprise-wide go-to.
Our final headline story comes from Alan Bondi from Digital Clarity Group, who wrote a story coming out of HubSpot's recent Inbound conference. HubSpot, at last week's Inbound, HubSpot made a number of noteworthy announcements, especially around several areas: content optimization system, social inbox, new reporting engine, and signals tools for sales teams. So Scott, which one of these announcements sticks out to you, or what do you make of all these announcements by HubSpot?
So I think, I'd like to talk about the content optimization system, or COS, and primarily because, frankly, there was a lot of announcements made, like you just said, and this one didn't get a whole lot of of talk. So since we're a content management show, let's talk about it. It is essentially HubSpot entering in the content management market. They were obviously one of the leaders for small to medium-sized businesses in the marketing automation space and email management and all of that. But now they're saying, we want to be your content management system as well. And I think it's extremely interesting that they actually call it a content optimization system and not a content management system. And I think that's because of some of the bad reputation that the CMS kind of just has generally. So here's a new entrant wanting to be still the new kid on the block, but they're going to have to blaze a trail as far as that lingo is concerned. But I think the really interesting thing here about this, Butch, is that we talk about content marketing, we talk about relevance to the audience, right? That's what we're trying to basically do, is orient around the audience when we're sharing information over the web and digital channels and stuff, and it's all about context and relevance and what they care about. And when you think about HubSpot, so much of what drives them is that whole section over there called contacts. It's like, who came to your website specifically? Who opened this mail? Who came to this landing page? Who converted?
By the
it's
way,
all
we have
about
all
the
the tools that can track that for you, and we can get it for you. And I commend them for that. Right?
Exactly. Right. But now there's taking that one step further, and they're basically saying now we can manage the content on your website and tailor and personalize based on all of that. So now you've got one system that manages all that, and it really truly is built about that customer record. And now combine that, as even we do at Digital Clarity Group, with Salesforce.com and how it's going to be able to sync with your SFA there and your Salesforce automation tool and your CRM system. And now you've really got some serious power.
One thing I've learned about the CMS space, you guys love acronyms.
We do love acronyms. I try not to.
COS now.
I'm sorry.
I gotta memorize content optimization systems now, right? Figure this out?
I don't know if anybody else is going to go adopt that term anytime soon, but I do really think it's interesting. It's, I've gotten on my soapbox here before about customer experience management being focused on the customer and the individual, not just that it's managing cross-channel digital experiences. And I think this is something that can do it. It's not going to handle your complex scenarios. It's not going to start competing with, Sitecore and that sort of stuff right away. By far, its personalization capabilities are really down to the individual user. But I tell you, it's a neat concept.
All right, time for our guest segment now here on CMS-Connected. And as we segue and switch into our guest segment, a quick reminder that you are watching the web content management industry's only news commentary show, CMS-Connected. I'm Butch Stearns, he's Scott Lear. And before we bring in our guest, to reinforce what we're talking about today, the overarching theme of this show today is embracing one's content marketing strategy. So, like Denzel Washington's character said in Streets of Philadelphia, explain it to me like I'm a 4-year-old. Well, I like to do that. So let's go to the definition from Wikipedia, if you will, of content marketing to reinforce to you and to us about what content marketing is all about. Wikipedia says that content marketing is any marketing format that involves the creation and sharing of media and publishing content in order to acquire customers. Now, the second definition comes from the Content Marketing Institute. Content marketing is focused not on selling, but on simply communicating with customers and prospects. The idea is to inspire business and loyalty from buyers by delivering consistent, ongoing, valuable information. And now let's bring in our guest to dive into that. She is an author, a blogger, a speaker. She also happens to be the Chief Strategy Officer at her company called Sprout Content. Her name is Dechay Watts. Dechay, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How are you? As we throw that definition of content marketing out there, what's your reaction to that? Is that marketing as it's always been, or what is the term content marketing? How does that differ from age-old marketing principles?
Well, I think you touched on a little bit. The biggest difference is that in the past, talking even going back 50 years, the marketing was more about entertaining and trying to grab people's attention and really pushing a message out. And in today's age, with all of the information that's available, and how people can go to they go where they want to find the information that they want, marketing's changed a bit. So you really have to create content and provide information that people trust and that they connect to and that they can dive into to really understand your business and who you are. So it's less about pushing a message out and more about, a mindset and a philosophy around growing your business by connecting humanly to your target market, providing valuable content, really thought leadership and helpful information to build trust.
So Dechay, as we're getting to know you a little better, tell us a little bit more about Sprout Content. You're an agency, and tell us about your how you do business and who you do business with.
Sure. So Sprout Content, we started about 4 years ago, really dove into the content arena before the term content marketing was talked about. So we were in the beginning, which gave us a lot of leverage to get to know the industry leaders and do a lot of really strategy around coming up first and on the first page of search engines for content marketing and really understanding the philosophy behind it so we could explain it to business owners now. And in the beginning, it was a lot of people came to us for marketing and didn't really understand the concept of the content piece. And, it was a little bit of a sell in the beginning on our end of proving the value. But over time, the numbers are there, and it's just it's kind of interesting to see the creative content part tie into the numeric statistical marketing part that so many businesses require.
Gotcha. Hey, Dechay, this is Scott. Nice to see you. So how does one get started on this then? What's the give us the 101? How does somebody get out of the gate on this?
Content Marketing 101?
Yeah, you got it.
Well, the first part is really, it's so easy to jump into the tactical part of content marketing when you hear about blogging and social media and, downloads and ebooks. But where we really suggest starting is backing it up a bit and starting with your voice, your tone, and your key messaging. So if, to bring in a client from Sprout Content, where we really begin is what we call a content style guide. And that's interviewing your business, interviewing your employees, interviewing your customers, and understanding really what your key messages are and what differentiates you. Because before you can start creating the content, you really have to be clear on what you're saying and the messages you want to get out. So that's the beginning phase. And then once that's understood, out of it comes your buyer personas and knowing who you're speaking to, knowing where they are going to find you and where they're looking for your type of information. And from there, we would move into a strategy around what type of content to create, how much content to create, and tying it all back into whatever your specific goals are. And everyone has different goals. So, it may not be, a lot of people will come and they'll say, we want to be in every social media platform. Well, that's not always the best use of your resources. So it's making sure that you're creating content where you need to be for who you need to create it.
So, follow-up question on that, Dechay, then. So you find your voice, you work with a client to get the content style guide, you build your buyer personas, you then think about the type of content that you want to do. when it comes to tactics, let's not get to channels and all that yet, but now the next step with tactics, what are some of the tactics that content marketers are using now that they find most effective?
That's a good question. I think that effectiveness goes back to what your goals are. So, for example, if you you want to drive more traffic to your website, then some great tactics would be blogging. There's a statistic that's from HubSpot actually that 67% of businesses that blog get more leads than those that don't. So in that scenario, blogging would be a great tactic to use. If you're trying to maybe upsell your current clients, then a tactic would go into e-newsletters, really engaging them on a regular basis, providing them with staying top of mind, giving them specials and more, showing them your thought leadership and that sort of thing. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve, which tactics are best to go for. But as a whole, social media, articles, blogs, e-newsletters, case studies, videos, those are what we see most often being used.
And is part of the challenge here? I know that when I hear we've got a content marketing expert on our team as well, and I know that he talks about content marketing is also necessarily not always done by the marketer themselves. That it's kind of taking the kind of marketing aspect, but having others within your organizations be the ones who are the experts and putting them in front of the camera or the mic, so to speak. Is that valid from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a great idea. What we run into often is that the time and budget, everyone has a job already. So when there are those extra people that are interested and they, have a little bit of time to maybe write a blog post, absolutely, it's great. And not only does that really speak from them, but they get excited and then they're going to share the information and then it kind of trickles out in that way. So it's definitely a good idea if the resources are there.
Dechay, Scott brought up budget, and you did too, so let's go there. What percentage of budgets are being spent now on content marketing as compared to not that long ago where advertising budgets and marketing budgets were all being spent on paid advertising, or the majority of it was? What's the shift, what's the trend that's going on now when it comes to budgets for content marketing?
Well, the shift is good from our perspective because it's increasing. This year, 2013, about 30%, I think it's actually 33% of B2B marketing budgets are spent on content marketing, which is up a bit from last year, which was around 25%. So we're hoping that increases again. I know new reports will come out from the Content Marketing Institute in the next few months, so we'll get to see how that's progressing.
What are the sort of metrics though that you advise them to be able to track? So they're spending more on this, and I suppose you'd like to see that number going up because you believe that this is a more appropriate tactic, and I do as well. What sorts of kind of metrics, I guess, are those same companies that you're advising looking at to determine the impact of content marketing?
To prove the value?
Yeah.
Sure. There's a few different ones. I think the one we look at kind of the most, we've had some success with a few of our clients in this realm, is looking at the traffic increase and then the leads that they get to their site. So, for example, one company we work with through the different content marketing tactics, they increased their site visits by 83% in the first 6 months, and that turned into a huge change in the leads that they were getting, and not only the quantity but the quality of leads. So before, they were getting a lot of leads from very small businesses that weren't really their target market, but because we were able to tell their story better and show their thought leadership through a lot of different content, it proved their value up front when people were finding them, and the right people started finding them. So that's definitely one. Another one that is often tracked is an increase in traction from social media. So, you guys had mentioned HubSpot earlier. We're actually a HubSpot partner, and that they do have a lot of great tools to be able to track this sort of traffic increase. So one company we worked with through doing more distribution through in their social media channels, their Facebook fans increased by 5%, Twitter was up by about 40%, and you can actually track not only the increase in followers and fans, but then what they do once they come to your site. So you're bringing people in from these social media channels and then encouraging them to interact and engage and eventually become leads.
Scott, let me ask you about, again, for the subject of this show, content marketing and a strategy around it, but in the CMS space, I want to throw a couple of stats at you, and you tell me what it means to the CMS space. And this is from a blog, interestingly, a Salesforce blog, and the title is 25 Content Marketing Stats to Jumpstart Your Efforts. And when it comes to enterprise level companies, when it comes to B2B companies, I find some of these stats fascinating. To Deshay's point right there about social media, for example, social media and blogs reach 8 out of 10 of all US internet users. Think about that stat. 4 out of every 5 people that go on the internet are being reached by either a social media channel or a blog. It's not surprising, but that number continues to grow. Now to the B2B parts of them. 91% of B2B marketers use content marketing. Over 91%. B2B companies that blog generate 67% more leads per month than those who don't blog. So again, tying this all in to CMS systems, into the CMS world, what do those stats say to you about what Deshay's talking about here, about the importance of a content marketing strategy and what you have to do?
I think I think the latter point about the blogging and the efficacy of that and kind of the numbers that you're seeing there support exactly what Dechay is saying. And I think, a lot of the, when I said earlier that 67% of the sites out there don't have a CMS, I don't think that most of those are owned by larger enterprises who are the ones, or not even larger, smaller enterprises who are the ones who are practicing this. I would imagine it's a much smaller number. Most of them are using some sort of a CMS. It's just that it's far outweighed by the number of individuals who have small websites as well. But I think the 91% though number really throws me off. I tend to really differ that 91% of people of companies out there are actually using content marketing.
That's a stat according to the Content Marketing Institute that 91% of B2B marketers use content marketing. So it might have come from a survey that things were checked off.
Interesting.
I guess, Dechay, my question to you is, when it comes to a content marketing strategy, in your experience with your clients or in your opinion in general, is it different for B2B companies than it is for B2C? Is it different for enterprise level companies than it is for SMB? Or are the principles still the same?
I think the principles are still the same, but I mean, it's even different in B2B to B2B companies. It really goes back to what you're selling and what you're trying to achieve with your client base and where you are in your business process, if you're just growing or if you're trying to if you're at a area that you can just trying to maintain growth. So it really, the actual tactics that go into it are going to be different for everyone, but the philosophy behind it is the same. And you're wanting to provide really fantastic information that shows your thought leadership and also encourages people to trust you. And another stat that's kind of interesting, and maybe this ties into the 90% of businesses using content marketing, and this stat's been around a while, but an article came out in Inc. today or yesterday that kind of reinforced it. But it said that 10 pieces of content are consumed before a buyer makes a purchase. So not having those 10 pieces of content, if you're a business and you don't have the blogs and the downloads and the social media and whatever else that people are looking for to really get to know you, you're losing out. So I can see, I don't know where that 90% came from, but I could see why people are starting to, understand the importance of it.
That's a very interesting stat, and I'll follow it up with this one, Scott, like you to comment on. Companies, listen to this stat. Companies would, to your point about tactics and using all different tactics, to your point about 10 pieces of content, Dechay, being read or consumed before a purchase is made, companies with 10,000 or more employees use 18 different content marketing tactics, according to the Content Marketing Institute and Marketing Profs. So large enterprise companies are using as all these tactics. Their strategy may be off, they may be doing stuff, but they understand what's going on. They understand that consumers have the power now and that you have to have, or you should have, I guess that's my question. Do they understand the value of a content marketing strategy and that you should have one? And how it ties into a CMS system?
And I would have thought that the answer was no, that they didn't mostly. I felt like we were still, there's a number of us out there, Dechay obviously is included in those, who are out there still evangelizing this practice. So again, you know, I don't know if the question was, does your company have a blog? And that then means that they were kind of categorized as one who checked the box that you use content marketing. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the case. When I think about content marketing, I think of the kind of way that Dechay is talking about here, where she's basically saying you really are trying to become service-oriented to your audience. You're trying to understand who the personas are, and you're trying to basically be relevant to them and help them in making whatever decisions or taking whatever actions it is that they're trying to do. And that, to me, is kind of a content marketing strategy. And then it's supported by the tactics are the blogging and the social and a number of other ways to do that. I don't know that there's that large of a percentage of companies out there who kind of really understand and get that. I think as individual consumers, it's not hard to figure it out, because as individual, you know, a B2B is composed of a whole bunch of C's, right? We're all individual consumers.
All people, right.
We all know what we expect. We all want
It's
information at our
P2P,
fingertips.
as people like to say, right?
There it is, exactly,
Right.
P2P. Wasn't that a peer-to-peer yet? I don't think that was. But anyway.
Dechay, what's your comment or your reaction to that little diatribe we had?
Well, I definitely agree with the P2P part. We actually touched on that. We just launched a book. It came out this last month, and it's all about being, it's called Brands in Glass Houses, and it's all about being transparent with your messaging, because at the end of the day, you're talking to a person. And especially at the enterprise level, that thought can get diluted. And also for companies that have been around for a long time, you know, they kind of forget that you're selling to a person somewhere in some business to really engage them. So I definitely agree with that part of the diatribe. I don't remember what other section would you like a commentary on?
I know, we could go on forever. Dechay, you've been wonderful. Let's finish up with this. Well, it's a general question, but I want to see where you take it. What is the biggest challenge that most marketers are facing today, in your opinion?
In the content marketing realm, it's definitely creating enough content. And that also ties into, you know, knowing how much you need to create. So in our view, we don't believe in creating, you know, 1,000 blog posts just to do it for SEO or any other reason. But really creating enough of the right kind of content is definitely the biggest challenge. And I would say after that, probably the type of content is the second biggest need that's out there.
I'm glad you amended that, quite honestly, because you started by saying creating enough content is the biggest challenge marketers are facing, but you ended it by saying creating enough of the right content. And I couldn't agree with you more, because putting a blog post out once a month and having 30 really crappy blog posts is completely worse than having one really good blog post, using the two extremes as an example.
Absolutely. And there's enough noise out there. We don't need to create more just to hear ourselves talk.
Again, she's an author, she is a blogger, she is a speaker at many conferences. She's also the Chief Strategy Officer at Sprout Content. Dechay, really, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciated it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
And that is our guest segment here on CMS-Connected. So interesting to hear all of that. Again, how about a follow-up comment from you about, you know, a content strategy? Again, this is CMS-Connected. So what did you take out of that that's most relevant for the CMS world, or the CMS space?
I just love that we're having the topic of conversation in the first place, right? I mean, it just, like you said at the outset of the show, this is all about strategy. And you know, the name of this show is almost a misnomer. We shouldn't just be talking about tools here. It's really about how do you help the folks like you who are in the audience put these tools to use to achieve things like connecting with your audience. And I think content marketing is one really solid strategy and way to do that. And the CMS just essentially is a tool that enables you to be able to do that. But yeah.
All right, you are watching CMS Connected. I'm Butch Stearns along with Scott Lewer. We are back in just a bit. When we come back, Bryan Ruby will join us in our Spotlight segment. And also we have Rapid Fire coming up, as we always do, so stick around.
Hello, Steve. Thanks for coming. My name is John. Any questions before we start? Good. How does your company currently measure results in digital marketing?
Well, we look at the bigger picture and try to see what kind of ripple effect we go for the key influencers who are. At the end of the day, we want to create a halo effect around our brand recognition.
We try to fine-tune engagements to get.
Working on getting a real 360-degree view of the customer to
cross-segment synergies. Likes?
Closed-loop marketing.
Search.
Classification of our brand.
SEO?
Click-through rates?
Just make it go viral.
Businesses today demand a powerful web content management and online marketing platform that can provide the best value at an affordable price with unlimited website possibilities. Kentico, the .NET Enterprise Marketing Solution and web content management platform of choice, powers more than 12,000 websites in over 84 countries, which means you get a stable, well-tested solution. Fully loaded with over 350 web parts and controls and more than 80 extensible modules. Kentico provides you with a fully integrated solution for building your online presence and running successful online marketing campaigns. It allows you to quickly launch an effective B2B or B2C site, intranet, online store, or branded online community, fully integrated with Facebook and Twitter. Test drive Kentico EMS today to get a complete appreciation of all its powerful features and capabilities.
Time now for our Spotlight segment, and we talk about eSpirit. In today's episode of In the Spotlight, we'll be reviewing eSpirit's CMS solution, FirstSpirit. eSpirit was founded in Dortmund, Germany in 1999 and is represented with 13 locations in Germany, the United States, Great Britain, Australia, and Switzerland. The company is part of the Adesso Group, one of the largest German IT service providers. Customers benefit from a network of very experienced, certified partner organizations providing competent consulting, implementation services, and support. And to talk about eSpirit and to talk about FirstSpirit, we bring in our good buddy Bryan Ruby from CMS Report. Bryan, how are you?
We're real good, Butch. I'm real good.
Good to talk to you once again. How you doing?
Real good, real good. I'm trying to gear up for one final camping trip this weekend.
Oh, there you go. For people that don't know about you, Bryan, and about CMS Report, give us the short answer to that. What are you all about? What's CMS Report all about?
Well, it's a lot about what I don't know. So then I go look for it and try to find out what I need to know. And so it's a nice place as far as just to talk about content management systems, and we kind of focus on the software side. You know, everybody says it's more than software, and they're right, but there is some importance in software too.
So let's start with FirstSpiritCMS. What can you tell us about it?
Well, you know, it's even though they've been around for a while, they're relatively new on this side, you know, the ocean, and so we're just starting to get to know them. And you know, a couple of the things is you know, they have over 20,000 projects they claim they've done, and representing over 1,000 different brands. So they're representing brands like Speedo, Sterling Jewelers, Bosch, Nintendo even. You know, so they're definitely as far as geared towards those high-end sites, and it's not probably something, you know, Bob's Bait Shop at the corner is going to use. So some of the dry stuff as far as the specs on it, they're a Java-based content management system, and their focus is integration. They're really trying to gear up what we've heard before. You know, they're trying to gear up towards integrating with service providers, so you don't have to switch over to their platform completely, but you use them to connect with the service providers that you would like, or I should say the third-party services. So they've got offerings, you know, where they can integrate with like Portal Liferay, JBoss, IBM WebSphere, SharePoint, etc. Some of the things we've seen before. One of the things that they're focused really on is operating system independence, database independence, and along with that integration, they're really focused on usability. I mean, and it's in a huge way. You know, we've talked about inline editing and that strange geeky debate whether inline editing is good or not, and but their focus is really taking it to a higher level, and it's pretty amazing stuff. So some of the features, Butch, that I'm liking is they are offering, as far as on the usability side, they offer as far as two types of clients. They offer a web client and they offer a Java client. Their web client is geared towards the normal user, the normal editor, the normal author, but it's also very heavy in inline editing, and it's a lot it's probably the slickest inline editing implementation I've seen for a content management system. Editors are gonna love it. My first thought is this is the content management system for the user. This is the kind where if you have authors that are frustrated with their content management systems, complain to you all the time that, this is great, maybe for running a site, but for editing and for writing articles and those type of things, this is going to be a step up.
Okay.
So they have this web client that's kind of for the normal user, but they also have this Java client that I'm tell you to struggle for as far as how to describe it, because it's, we have inline editing that we talk about. If you want to call this Java client that's geared towards the advanced users, the authors, the administrators, I would call it, and I'm making this word up, but I would call it inline integration. And the only way I can explain this is, when you're trying to, let's say you're trying to embed something from Google Maps or YouTube, those video stuff. The old way, or the current way of doing it, is we take the code, we embed it into our page, and there's a lot of work to do that. And more times than not, somebody needs help because the code is wrong. Well, what FirstSpirit does is it's really integrated into this nice little platform. You have like a search mechanism. It brings up the video on the right side of your page. You click the video, you drag it over, and it's there. It's done. You don't worry about code. You don't worry about, as far as the cut and paste things. It's there, and it's really kind of a neat thing. And so what FirstSpirit is doing is basically this integration that works in a really, probably, I don't think I've seen anything like it. And maybe I just don't have a bigger world, but I'm really impressed with what they're doing.
Well, I just love the fact, Bryan, that you're inventing terms here on CMS-Connected. Inline integration. Inline integration. We're going to get headlines out of this. I love it. So you talked about the slickness of their inline editing. You talked about their overall focus on usability of the features you like. What's missing? What's missing from this FirstSpirit?
Well, it's really two things, and they're not really necessarily missing, but challenges. So one of the things is they do have this very nice app center that's set up so you can get these third-party integrations. So, from a business point of view, you're going to wonder, well, how much are those apps? And because that's probably part of their modeling on that. But I'm going to assume that's a reasonable thing, but that's a question to ask. And the next thing, though, is because there's this big change in how this editing's done, it really is a step forward from what we've seen in the past. If you're a company that has a traditional content management system and you have, it's the training aspect that I think is going to be a challenge. It's very intuitive, but the problem is we always have somebody that doesn't have intuition. And in the past, we give them a step-by-step instructions how to run the software. I think this is one of those things where it's so intuitive. I think training is really going to be something that a company has to focus on. And that's something I didn't get a chance to talk to the people doing the demo. But really, how do you run the software? Because it is different.
Let me jump in there. Bryan, let me jump in there. So for a company, you're saying one of the challenges or one of the issues you have with it is that for a company that's focused on usability, that it takes too much training for a company to do this?
No, I'm not saying too much training. What I am saying, though, is I think if for companies, they traditionally like to invest in the software and in the workflow aspects. But this is something where you're going to want to make sure you also invest in your people that are running the software and make sure they know how to utilize this great piece of software.
Okay.
It's one of those things that I think, we have people that when you go from Microsoft Word and you're using in the cloud like Google Docs, they're lost. And I know that it sounds like, well, these are smart people, but they're lost. And so this is such a change that I would say that the challenge is going to be is kind of on the training side. Just getting people used to the new way of doing things with this content management system.
All right, so for eSpirit, who are their competitors when it comes to FirstSpirit here?
Well, I think Adobe would be one, with a lot of the inline type editing that they're doing, kind of being user-centric. They're kind of gearing themselves as a niche CMS. So I think in a lot of ways, there may not be a competitor for them. In fact, Gartner puts them as a niche. They're doing something different that we don't know where it's taking, but I tell you, it's really a very neat thing to do. It's one of those things that, when we talk about usability, there's a lot in here, and it's not a catchphrase. They're taking it very seriously, and they're really innovating in that aspect.
What do you expect that we're going to hear down the road from eSpirit about FirstSpirit?
Well, I think probably one of the things is since they've concentrated so much on the usability side, you do have those content management folks that like the structure and like the very systematic way of doing things. I think they're going to probably focus on making sure those people are happy too. And I think they do that too. Their Java client, which is geared towards the high-end user, it has a lot of these familiar things that we see in content management systems to deal with structure, to deal with as far as how you're deploying this to different channels, those type of things. But I think that's where they're probably going to the usability is such a huge improvement. I think they're going to have to reassure those more traditional folks that they're on the right path.
All right, that is Bryan Ruby. You can read him, you can consume him at CMS Report on any device you want, where you want. Bryan, thanks for your time. We always appreciate your insight.
All right, thank you, Butch.
All right, Bryan Ruby. That's what happens today.
You can consume him?
Yes, we're consumers. We're looking to consume our thought leaders.
That's right.
That's how we do it.
That's right. I want to be consumed too.
So, FirstSpirit, eSpirit put this out. Yep. Bryan talked about that they have a web client and a Java client. He talked about that they're focused on usability. He gave us the good points and the bad points. Now what, Scott? Talk about your take on
I
this.
think you hit it on the head when you asked him who do they compete with, and he had a little bit of struggle coming up with an answer to that, because it is a Java play. It's a Java product, which is kind of typically viewed to be mostly enterprise oriented. A lot of the kind of mid-market solutions just tend to be .NET solutions, and the Java ones are the larger stacks. eSpirit does not have this, they actually are in quite a lot of installs, but for the most part, they're being pulled in by other partners. So they tend to be the product that's pulled in by the Hybris, by the SAP, by the other kind of large players, or the large portal products, that sort of a thing, where you don't usually find kind of eSpirit as the sole CMS by itself. It's usually when you're trying to integrate with these other major tools. And so kind of who do they compete against is a good question, because they kind of have this small time feel. They were one of the first ones with this kind of app store idea and having apps kind of similar to the open source model where they've got partners who have built these apps and made them available. So they were one of the first in the proprietary CMS space to do that. But then they also talk about integrating with Hybris and SAP and OpenText, these kind of much larger players. So then it seems to be so they kind of this tale of two cities a little bit with them.
So let me ask you,
hard to position.
Let me ask you a different question. If we're talking about their competition, you seem to be saying who should the question they should really be asking is who should they be partnering up with?
Yeah, exactly. And I think one thing that they've done really well is that they actually have a lot of companies will go and say, yes, we work with SharePoint, we work with whatever, and they have some small little one-off connector. FirstSpirit has a lot of detailed examples of kind of deep integrations and connections with some of these tools. It's just that they don't have, whether it's the marketing budget, the presence in the States, whatever it might be, to get a lot of adoption kind of on their own right. So you don't tend to see them in these kind of head-to-head shortlisting competitions with folks. You mostly see them being pulled in as a portal starts to kind of reach its limits and start to need CMS capabilities, then they might go and pull them in, that sort of thing. But you'll be able to see them at our conference coming up. They'll be at Digital Pulse, so if you want to get a first look.
You ready for rapid fire?
Yeah, man, I'm ready. Let's do it.
You're always ready for rapid fire.
I'm always ready.
Time now for rapid fire, where we put Scott on the clock here on CMS Connected. All right, here we go. Rapid fire. 10 minutes for rapid fire, 5 stories. We start with our first story, which some CMS experts, you being one of them, meet at the J-Boy Conference. Scott, you attended the CMS Expert Group East Coast on September 17th in New York City, focused on topics such as usability, digital marketing, content strategy, standards, performance, implementations, and technology. What'd you learn? Tell us what we need to know about this conference.
Yeah, it's not a conference. J-Boy, while he does run conferences, there's one in Philadelphia and one in Aarhus coming up in Denmark. I really wanted to give this kind of a plug because I just love, it was one of the first, I've actually attended 2 of them so far, but I love that they're pulling together these truly, J-Boy has always been around, and Giannis, that's founder, has always been around pulling people together to have good facilitated discussions. And at this group, they have a number of groups and you can see them on their website, I think it's jboy.com. The groups that you can sign up for that essentially you subscribe to be able to meet maybe quarterly or so, and there's a number of different options. This particular one is a CMS experts group, which includes some analysts, some agencies, and as well some kind of high-powered users who got together. They make sure that the groups are no more than 20 people and you have facilitated discussions around a topic. We had one in New York City recently where Jeff Cram talked about the kind of the vast difference between the CMSs and the chasm between CMSs and things like content marketing and making that publisher experience more usable. It was a great discussion, but I just really I wanted to push people that if you're interested in joining these sorts of groups, they have a good offering for you.
Our second story in Rapid Fire focuses on that age-old debate, if you will, let me put it this way, that constant challenge of IT and marketing, and here it is. It's from a Forrester study. Kevin Conway from CenturyLink recently writes an interesting article on Forbes.com, and in this article he states, quote, that new studies shows there's at least one thing that marketing and IT groups can agree on. Current web content management systems are just not cutting it. According to Kevin, and according to this Forrester study, it validates this dissatisfaction. 50%, according to this Forrester study, 50% of IT decision makers blamed frustrations on internal implementation issues, 37% blamed wrong technology selection, and 20% blamed poor strategy development. Your reaction to this?
I think the second most powerful theme of this show, besides content marketing, is that we've been seeing this irony here, where you've got these large complex systems like we talked about IBM being, praised when they actually become more consumerized and they have capabilities that are easier to use because that's so uncommon. Then you've got these younger players like the Boxes and the Hubspots of the world who are trying to add back essentially complexity, and they're being kind of put on the fence about how put to the grind about do you have security, do you have some of the more complex capabilities, workflow, that sort of stuff, which essentially bog them down. I think the article is right to say that you should be the implementation is to blame. That's one of the themes of DCG that we care a lot about, and that's why we launched this research report on service providers. I also think it's right to say that picking the wrong tool is a choice, but in this case what I want to say to you is that buyers can shield some blame here. It's not all about the vendors. When you're entering into a CMS selection or any sort of a technology selection, be real about it. I know that I'm going over time here. One is find the right partner here, and 2 is don't overbuy. What's good for GE is not necessarily good for you. Don't look for all the checkboxes to be collected because you're not going to necessarily use it.
Our next story focuses on Kentico, in particular, Kentico Connections, and it also focuses on an event they just had here outside of Boston and a series of events that they have. Their Kentico Connections event was recently held at the Burlington Marriott outside of Boston. The 2-day conference is for developers, marketers, partners, and business owners looking to derive maximum value in return from their marketing efforts. And the conversation that fuels the Kentico events is around the shift. The fairly sizable shift that's going on, sort of tying into all that we're talking about here, the consumers have all the power now. Talk about that.
They are, in a sense, practicing what they preach in this case, where we talked about with Dechay about putting the customer kind of at the center of your strategy and really being about being relevant to them and what are they trying to do and how can you help them. Kentico, likewise, is trying to do the same thing. Instead of having, they've essentially replaced the web CMS as the center of their strategy and put the customer at the center of their strategy, if those are kind of parallels there, which I don't think that they necessarily are. But I think the point is good, that they really want to understand their audience of users, and they realize their audience of users is not people who want to be good at managing content. It's people who want to basically market their product. And so creating this, they've called it integrated marketing solution now. So more so than a CMS with other periphery capabilities, they're trying to be the one-stop-shop solution for marketers who kind of from morning until they close down their computer at the end of the day need to be able to work in a tool to be able to get out the message of their organization and be relevant to their customers. And essentially that's what they're trying to create, and I think that's what we're seeing a lot of companies try to do.
Our third headline focuses on Drupal and a major announcement. Our fourth headline, I'm sorry. 3, 2, 1. Our fourth headline focuses on Drupal and a major announcement that they made recently. And of course, when we talk about Drupal, this is evangelical. You can't mention Drupal without mentioning how their followers are evangelical. They've introduced Backdrop, a fork of Drupal. Drupal, what's a fork?
Yeah, so you need some education in this too. Drupal didn't announce this in any way, but we'll talk about this more on the next show. I want to spend a significant, I've got a good friend in the industry, Jeff Eaton, who's well known and understood I think well respected in the Drupal space, and he's agreed to come on the show to spend some time talking about this. But essentially in the open source world, much like happened with Mambo to Joomla, a fork is when essentially the community decides that they want to kind of take the code in a different direction and separate from the strategy essentially of the kind of predecessor. So in this case, you've got a group of people who want to take Drupal in a different direction. They don't like where it's going. I think what started to happen is that Drupal is growing up. It's starting to get used by a lot more enterprises, and they're making it more complex by the new Drupal 8 is built on Symfony. It's a whole new architecture, and more than 75% of the code is being replaced. Well, that's caused a stir in the community where there are a lot of kind of self-taught, frankly, amateurs who are using it and have built entire businesses around it. It becoming more complex is not necessarily in their interest because they're not developers by trade. And so we see this backdrop movement starting, and it'll be interesting to follow that and to talk to Jeff about that. But I actually think it's kind of a good thing.
Kyle, you can scrap that whole lead into that list. Just exit right out. From something I don't know anything about to something I do know something about, an announcement, if we will, or an update for you on an event we have coming up, partnered up with the Pulse Network and Digital Clarity Group. It is called Digital Pulse, October 16th and 17th at the Heinz Auditorium in Boston. The room is filling up, folks. You need to go check it out. We're dead serious about this. We're proud about this event and the partnership that we have with it. From the Digital Pulse side, what are some of the things you're most happy about that are coming to fruition, that are going to be at this event, that are going to be exciting for people to know about?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the event. It's the first one that we've put on at Digital Clarity Group, and I'm happy to have you guys as our partners in this. We're actually we've got Ray Velez who's coming in to speak, and he's recently written a book. He's the CTO of Razorfish and recently written a book with the former CEO of Razorfish, Bob Lord, called Converge. And Converge is all about marketing and IT coming together, essentially, and those worlds of technology and marketing coming together, which tends to be the theme of this show. And I've got the book here. This is it. But essentially, that becomes the theme of the conference. So Ray's going to kick it off, and it's a conference oriented, as you know, towards both marketers, technologists, and how these worlds are coming together, how digital disruption is impacting the enterprise's everyday life, and that if you don't get on the bandwagon and start doing something a little bit differently to orient towards your consumers, then you're going to be left behind. We've also got some pretty awesome other speakers. We've got Lee Daniels is coming. He's the director and producer of The Butler, also of other great movies, Monsters Ball and Precious. So he's going to be speaking there. We've got Andrew Davis, who's well respected in the marketing world, Robert Rose from our team, a number of great, Jeff Cram from the CMS world. So we've got some really great speakers, and I'm really excited about the audience.
Yeah, and let me add this in for those of you out there, if you haven't checked out our series of events, Inbound Marketing Summit, before. The website is inboundmarketingsummit.com. It is a year-long community, to be honest with you, that 3 times a year, we do the event in Boston, San Francisco, and New York. We just did it in San Francisco in the summer. We did it in New York earlier this year. But our Boston event is really our signature event. To have Digital Pulse now as part of it, and for us partnering up, we're excited about that. You've brought a lot to our events, and your group has over the years, Scott. And now to have a focused event with Inbound Marketing Summit, we're really excited about that.
That's right. Yeah, us too. We're in the last push to really just fill it up. We've got hundreds of folks coming to it, and we're just really trying to get that message out there in the last couple. It's 2.5 weeks, I think, from now.
Yeah,
right?
it's coming right up.
And 7th
and you mentioned
17th.
speakers. We've got some speakers that maybe you've heard of or maybe you haven't that are phenomenal. Tom Webster, Tamsin Webster, husband and wife. They're both phenomenal in what they do. David Oxman from Life is Good here in Massachusetts is coming as the VP and head of marketing. I mean, we're really happy with the agenda we have. We encourage you to check it out. out and find out what IMS is all about. It's a really cool community.
Loie Maxwell, also from formerly of CVS and Starbucks, their chief brand officer. So yeah, really, really awesome.
All right, great job as always.
It was good, man.
Yeah.
I wasn't thrilled about last month's show, but I think we did it. We're back on track.
Well, let me teach you one lesson I've learned from being in broadcasting for these many years.
You are the broadcast king of Boston. That is
You're
for sure.
never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think you are. So don't get hurt patting yourself on the back over this one. Nice job, though. A quick reminder that that's it what we have for today's show, but coming up at our next CMS Connected in October, we'll be focusing on site globalization and a spotlight feature on marquee CMS. So mark your calendars in October. Check CMS Connected for the exact date of that coming up. And finally, I'd also like to thank both of our sponsors, Falcon Software, as always, for sponsoring CMS Connected. Again, they'll take care of you with a smile. And of course, Digital Clarity Group. Scott is the president and chief principal analyst there. So on behalf of Scott Lear, thanks to Dechay Watts and Bryan Ruby for being a part of this show. Thank you for being a part of this show. And producer Kyle McNaught, associate producer Pete Shapiro. Have a great time, and we'll talk to you next time on CMS Connected.